Welcome back to the Even Your Dynasty show. It has been almost a week since we last recorded, but we are back. It's Thursday morning. We're going to talk a little bit about Buster Posey saying that he felt the Giants the roster's all set. Sounds like they're pretty much done making moves. Now, that said, he's an executive at the end of the day, no matter how much we think he's being honest. He's an executive at the end of the day, and they have been known to proclaim that they're done making moves and then make moves shortly after, because he did say they're keeping an eye out on the market, they're looking around, you know typical GM talk or president talk. And we'll see if they're actually done or not. I wouldn't be shocked if we see like an under the radar move. I do think they're probably done making big moves. I personally think the Giants have kind of made their direction clear, even though it's not necessarily the most obvious thing that they've picked a direction here. And I'll kind of jump in on that. But before we go down that road, we have an announcement for tomorrow. I told you guys all last week that we have a guest coming. I confirmed it with the person yesterday. Giants 14th round pick from last season, Jeremiah Jenkins, is going to be joining the show. He's an awesome guy, going to have a ton of fun. He wants to do it live, so everybody can hop in there, ask your questions if you want. Fire away. We are going to try and pull as many as we can, similar to when we did the interview with Charlie Zacconi. We do our best to try and pull up every question we possibly can. Obviously, keep them appropriate, but it's a lot of fun. We're excited to have Jeremiah on. For anybody that watched the Giants prospect video where they had them showing up in Oracle Park and doing the workouts there, he has quite a charismatic personality and everything. So it's going to be a lot of fun. He's excited to join. We're excited to have him. It is going to be at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow night. So tomorrow being Friday for anybody that's watching this tomorrow. So it's going to be at 7:30 p.m. instead of our normal 8:30. So just be aware. I will post stuff on X and Instagram and all this stuff to try and set a reminder for everyone. But if you do enjoy our content, like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell so you can be notified of this video, future videos, all the videos, and you'll see when we go live and whatnot. So Giants roster as it stands, the way I see it, I personally view 18 players as it stands as complete locks to make the roster. Now, one of those guys, you can probably talk me into them moving them off. Now, obviously, there are more positions that are going to be obvious fills, but I see competitions at different positions, and I see the potential for a variety of different players to make the team. And then, some of the positions, backup catcher, it's probably going to be one of two people, more than likely. So that's kind of where I stand. But as of right now, on the position player side, I see Bailey as a lock, Wade and Flores as basically locks, Fitzgerald at second base, Adames at short, Chapman at third, Ramos in left, center field Lee, and then for right now, I wrote it in pencil, Mikey Stremski in right field. That's the one spot where I could see a scenario where they maybe trade him in spring training, though I do feel like ultimately he's going to be on the roster in some capacity, even if he isn't the starter. On the pitcher side, Webb is a lock, Ray, Verlander, Hicks, Walker in the pen, Rogers, Doval, Miller, and Beck I view as locks. Now, granted, this is all barring health. So those are the 9 I see on each side of the ball that are going to be locks to be on the roster. Now, that means there are some openings where there's going to be competition. Fifth starter, I do think they're going to have a competition with Kyle Harrison Birdsong. And I would say a dark horse candidate would be Landon Roop, who threw the ball well last season. He actually threw the ball, if we were being honest, at the major league level, Landon Roop threw the ball better than the other two. So I would say he's a dark horse. Now, I would say he's also the least likely to win the job because I think the other two have higher potential. I think the Giants are going to try and roll with one of those two. And if I had to put a betting favorite, Kyle Harrison's probably going to be the guy. Other openings, that leaves 3 spots in the pen potentially, if my math is correct here. Yeah, 3 spots in the pen. The other options I could see, Roop could be an option there. Randy Rodriguez, Sean Jelly, Trevor McDonald, Keaton Wynn, Lachesi, Juan Sanchez, Spencer Bivens, Mason Black maybe as a bulk guy, or Carson Ragsdale is, I think, a guy that he's got kind of a funky delivery, big, tall guy, lanky, has, like I said, kind of a weird delivery, but has some really nasty stuff. Maybe they like him out of the pen. He's a guy that I could see, being a potential option for them. On the other side with the bench, I think you have a few obvious catcher, backup catcher. You're going to have one. Uh, Murphy is probably the betting favorite. Sam Huff is an option. I think they're going to have a competition there. If Huff shows up to spring training and flat out outplays Tom Murphy, do not be surprised if he's the backup. Also, no one knows if Murphy's even going to be healthy or not. That's the other part of this. So there are a lot of questions surrounding that position. A utility guy playing the infield. Obviously, they already have two first basemen. You have Flores, you have Wade. Probably not necessarily looking for a guy that plays first there, but you have both Casey Schmidt and Brett Wisely that can both potentially play second, short, and third. Casey's obviously the stronger third baseman. You have Chapman. It's not as much of a concern. Wisely's probably the better second baseman and shortstop. Maybe that fits more of a need. Plus, he's left-handed. Might make sense to have him as a bench piece. I don't think the Giants are going to worry as much about the handedness of, what side of the plate they hit from. I think they're going to be more concerned with who plays, who's the best option. And Casey Schmidt played better, especially in the second half last season. Wisely obviously had a really strong first half, both in AAA and in the majors, and he kind of fell off. So it'll be interesting. Now they are going to have another spot that they might, both make the roster. There's always that potential. They're going to need a fourth outfielder. Now you have some options: Matos, McRae, Encarnacion. I could see Encarnacion winning that job and being a right-handed platoon with Yaz, and then getting occasional DH reps. I could see that scenario. I could see them doing something similar with Matos. I could also see a scenario where either Matos or McRae just flat out goes out and wins the starting job, and then Yaz gets kicked to fourth outfielder. But I think, like I mentioned earlier, I see Yaz as probably a lock to be on the roster in some capacity. But they're going to need a fourth outfielder either way. So kind of the four guys, or the three guys I see in that competition there, with a couple of them having the potential to go out and win the job. I would love to say I could see Encarnacion winning a full-time starting corner outfield job. I find it unlikely. I just, it's kind of my gut that I don't think the team views him that way. So I think if he's the guy, it's going to be more in a platoon role with Yaz, just my personal opinion. And then that leaves one more bench spot. There's a couple guys we alluded to. I think, Schmidt or Wisely, whoever I could see them keeping both of those guys. I could see a scenario where both Matos and Encarnacion are on the roster. I do think McRae is a guy that needs to start every day. So unless he comes out and wins the starting job, he needs to probably be in Sacramento for at least till around the All-Star break to get reps. So that's just my opinion. I think he needs to, make some changes to his swing, either flatten it out a little bit, focus on getting the ball in play more, and just work on his approach as a whole at the plate, because his glove is obviously ready. The speed is ready. Those are things that can impact games from day one. We already saw that. He has some power. He has the power to potentially change a game. He did that in a few games. He won them a few games last season in the second half, but he also struck out 40+% of the time. So you can't do that. So he's got to find a way to get on base. And I think there's going to involve some changes to his approach. So it'd be fine if he goes down to Sacramento for half the year or so, gets 300-400 at bats. I don't think anybody's going to complain about that. Like, that would be just fine for his development. But a couple other guys that I want to throw out there, Jake Lamb, they obviously signed him. I don't think anybody's super excited about that, but if he mashes in spring training, maybe there's a scenario where they keep him and he DHs occasionally, kind of a contingency at first base, but I think he's probably the least likely, in my opinion. A couple other guys, David VR, he's out of options. If he has a huge spring and they like his bat, maybe he makes the opening day roster and some, as that fifth bench player, essentially. And then another guy I want to throw out there. I know we've kind of, poo-pooed on his defense quite a bit on this show, but Wade Meckler, I'm going to throw his name out there. He's actually kind of an ideal bench piece, with the exception of the fact that you don't really know where you can play him defensively. Um, in the outfield, he's really suspect at any of the three outfield spots. Maybe you can hide him in left field occasionally and feel fine with that in Oracle Park, but God, I would keep him away from center or right field. He has no business ever playing those positions in Oracle Park. But he has really good speed. He can swipe you bags. He's kind of a grinder at the plate. Maybe you feel really good about him as like a guy hitting 280 off the bench and then using him as a pinch runner. But I do kind of feel like the Giants may want to put him at second base in the minors. That's supposedly they're going to work him at second, which is where he played in college. I could see them wanting to put him at second base and getting him the reps every day for a chunk of the year. But he is also on his last option year. So he's kind of a weird situation. I like I said, I think he could be an ideal bench piece, but I don't know if he's a guy they would want to pull up right out the gate, or if they'd want to get him the reps in Sacramento for a chunk of the year defensively. So that's kind of the last guy that I think could potentially win a job there. So those are kind of where I see that's where I see the roster right now as it stands. It's a bit, obviously, I think people are going to be disappointed as a whole with the offseason. I've heard it a lot. I totally understand it. Especially after the Adames signing. I think everybody was excited. We all felt like they were going to have bigger moves coming and more coming. And then they had the Burns pursuit. Felt like it was kind of, we felt like it was kind of just a foregone conclusion. It was going to happen at some point. And then obviously Arizona swooped in. And then they never really showed interest, it sounds like, in guys like Alonso or, Santander. They didn't really go hard at either of those guys. And I think Posey sent a clear message. I do. And I think they set a direction. And I know a lot of people don't agree. A lot of people feel like, oh, well, you signed Chapman to an extension. You signed Adames. That says we're trying to win. But then you don't make any other big moves committing to winning. And they're kind of half, they have the vets potentially starting. And, I do feel like Posey is a believer in not just handing the jobs to some of the kids. Now, whether I agree with that or not, that's clearly kind of how he feels. And I think competition is good. I'm not a person that just like, oh, screw all the vets and do it. But I'm also realistic as far as where options are and all the factors at play. And at some point, it's my belief that you have to figure out what you have. And you can't just sit around waiting for these guys to, take the job or anything. Sometimes you just got to let them play and see if they can figure it out. But obviously, Posey thinks differently than that. So to me, they've left the door open, and he has said this. They've left the door open for young players to win jobs. Now, he didn't limit that to bench jobs. He hasn't committed to Yaz as a starter. If you listen to all his interviews, he says he likes Yaz. He's comfortable in a platoon role, blah, blah, blah. He said all these different things. Same things with like Murphy as a backup, as some of the, the starting pitching jobs and all that. I mean, he hasn't even really committed to Hicks as a starter, even though they've said, oh, he's a starter. We're going to let him go into the season starter. But then he very quickly says, but they're going to compete. So, he has made it clear to a lot of these young guys that you can go out and win jobs, whether that's as a starter, as a bench piece, whatever. You can go win jobs. And it does feel like this season is a quote unquote developmental year. And I know a lot of people don't like that because a lot of people feel like these are the San Francisco Giants. They have all this money. They should be this, further along. They shouldn't be on year 4 of being irrelevant. They shouldn't be have only one winning season since, 2016. They've had one winning season from 2017 till now, and it was somehow they won 107 games. You're right. The Giants shouldn't be in that situation, but they are. Like, that's the reality. You look in the mirror, you see the roster you have, and you realize there wasn't a ton of moves that this team could have made to be a legitimate contender. There were moves that they could have maybe been on the fringes of a wild card. I mean, there was stuff that we were kind of pushing for. Like, I liked Santander. I felt like that wouldn't have completely jeopardized their long term. But you do put yourself at risk making some of those moves where yeah, you might be decent for a couple of years, but you also could see this go south quickly. And in 3 years, we're back to where we're at, except for worse off because we have all this long-term money, no draft picks, no farm system, nothing. And we're just, hoping to flip it around again in another rebuild. So I don't think Posey wants to back himself into that corner by doing what they've done. Yeah, it sucks. They cut payroll. No one likes to hear that. I don't like to hear that. And I can promise all of you, if they cut payroll next season and they don't be aggressive with the money that they're going to have available, I'm going to be all over this team and Posey and all of them for being cheap. 100%. I will stand by that. But it gets them out of the, competitive balance tax for a year. You can reset that. It drops your qualifying offer penalties for next season back to 1 draft pick and $500,000 of international money. And they have so little money committed to next year that they can go sign a Kyle Tucker, as an example, for massive money and probably not even go over the tax, but also not even be much higher, if higher at all, than their current payroll. So they have set themselves up for next offseason. So next offseason, if they go cheap, by all means, everybody blast the team. I think it would be well deserved at that point. But this season, it makes sense. So you can not like it. Signing a guy like Verlander, where we've talked about it. If your team falls out of it, if he's having a good half, trade him, get something for him. They've done some moves that I think they're kind of trying to win, but not trying to jeopardize their long term, because they feel like we want to have some young guys win jobs. If everything lines up and the kids play well, we'll compete. If it's what we expect, we'll probably be looking to offload some contracts or some veterans. We've locked down certain positions and we feel good about the core of the team. And then hopefully in 2026, we get Bryce Eldridge and they can go sign a big player. I think that's the direction. We'll see. We'll see if it works out or not. But appreciate everybody jumping by. Like I said, tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Jeremiah Jenkins will be on the show with Dan and Ricky and I. It's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to see you all. And go Giants, and we'll catch you tomorrow night.